There is a jaw that ended a dynasty, and science can now prove it. For centuries, historians dismissed the Habsburg jaw as a quirk, a family trait passed down through portraits and palace gossip. Nobody thought to ask whether the paintings were recording a genetic disaster. 600 years of power, and the evidence was hanging on the walls the entire time, until one research team decided to measure the faces scientifically. But in 2019, a team of geneticists measured the faces of 15 Habsburg rulers and matched the deformity directly to their inbreeding coefficient. The more inbred the Habsburg, the worse the jaw. The Habsburgs ruled Europe for over 600 years. They controlled the Holy Roman Empire, Spain, Austria, and vast colonial territories. At their peak, the Habsburgs held more territory than any dynasty in European history. Their motto was simple: let others wage war, the Habsburgs would marry. Their strategy was not military conquest. It was marriage, generation after generation. Habsburgs married Habsburgs. The bloodline narrowed with every union. The marriage contracts were political instruments. Every union was a territory secured. Uncles married nieces. Cousins married cousins. The tree doesn't branch. It loops back on itself. And the jaw was the first visible sign that something was breaking. The condition is called mandibular prognathism, and the Habsburgs made it famous. The lower jaw grows forward beyond the upper jaw, creating a severe underbite. Speaking becomes difficult. Eating becomes a struggle. And it only gets worse with each generation. In mild cases, it is cosmetic. In severe cases, the mouth cannot close. And in the most extreme case, it left a king unable to feed himself until age 8. Charles II of Spain, the last of the Spanish Habsburgs, his body was a catalog of everything inbreeding can destroy. His inbreeding coefficient was 0.254. A child of first cousins has a coefficient of 0.0625. A child of siblings has 0.25. Charles exceeded even that. His parents were uncle and niece, but their shared ancestry made it far worse. His mother, Mariana, was also his father's niece, and she was herself the product of consanguineous marriage. That is higher than the child of a brother and sister. His genome had no diversity left. In 2019, researchers at the University of Santiago de Compostela published a landmark study. They analyzed 66 portraits spanning over 2 centuries of Habsburg rule. The researchers controlled for artistic exaggeration by comparing multiple portraits of each ruler. Where artists had softened features for political reasons, the measurements still captured the underlying structure. Even flattering portraits could not fully hide the bone structure beneath the skin. 11 features of facial deformity. 2 conditions, both recessive, both appearing more frequently when parents share a recent common ancestor. The correlation was statistically significant. More inbreeding meant worse deformity. This was measurable genetic damage, not gossip, not art history, data. And the portraits told the story in sequence. Maximilian I, born 1459, a mild protrusion, barely noticeable. His grandson, Charles V, had it worse. He struggled to close his mouth. Philip II continued the pattern. His jaw affected his speech. Philip III married his own cousin. Philip IV married his niece. Each generation compounded the genetic risk of the last. It was a genetic countdown. And every wedding accelerated the clock. And then 5 more generations of uncle-niece marriages. And then came Charles II. The jaw had consumed the face. The dynasty was running out of time. Historical records describe a man who could not walk until the age of 4. He did not speak clearly until age 10. His tongue was too large for his deformed mouth. Court records describe servants assigned to pre-chew his food. State functions were embarrassments. Foreign ambassadors reported to their monarchs that Spain's king appeared barely functional. One French diplomat wrote that the king of Spain inspired more pity than respect. His speech was nearly unintelligible. He suffered seizures throughout his life. He produced no air. He married twice, nothing. When he died in 1700 at 38, the Spanish Habsburgs ended, no heir, no succession plan. And every major power in Europe saw an opportunity. France, Austria, and England each claimed the throne. An empire's fate hung on one man's failed biology. But here is what most people miss. The Habsburgs saw the damage. They kept going anyway. Court physicians noted the increasing physical problems across generations. One physician recorded that a newborn prince had a head so large it could barely be supported. And yet, the marriages continued. Political necessity overrode biological reality every time. Every stillborn child was a data point, and every surviving heir was married back into the same bloodline. Advisors warned the marriages were producing weaker children. But the calculation was simple. Marrying outside the family meant sharing power with rivals. Marrying within it kept crowns and treasuries under one bloodline. They chose power. They chose the dynasty over the children. And genetics made them pay the price. The jaw was not just cosmetic. It was a warning that the genome was collapsing. Geneticists call it inbreeding depression. Closely related parents produce offspring with double defects. The child receives 2 copies of the same broken variant far more often than chance allows. In an outbred individual, perhaps 1 in 50 gene pairs carries 2 defective copies. In Charles II, the number was dramatically higher. Some gene variants in his genome likely passed through the same ancestor on both his mother's and father's side. These long runs of identical DNA are the genetic fingerprints of inbreeding. And Charles had them everywhere. Normally, a healthy copy from one parent masks the defective copy from the other. But when both parents carry the same ancestor's genes, there is no backup copy. The study found a second condition also correlated with inbreeding: maxillary deficiency. The midface collapses inward. The nose bridge flattens. The skull geometry distorts. Both conditions mapped across the dynasty's timeline. The pattern was unmistakable. Early Habsburgs with low inbreeding showed mild deformity. As marriages became more consanguineous, the jaw grew worse with every generation. The jaw is the visible marker. The deeper damage doesn't show up in oil paintings. The portraits don't show the immune system. They don't show fertility. They don't show the brain. The Habsburg infant mortality rate was staggering. Of 34 children born to the Spanish branch, only 10 survived to adulthood. That is a mortality rate above 70%. Genetic diversity in immune genes was vanishing. Many of these children died within their first year, some within their first week. Philip IV fathered at least 12 children. 8 died before reaching adulthood. 8 did not endure. And those who remained carried the biological and psychological markers forward into the subsequent generation. When both parents contribute identical immune genes, pathogen recognition narrows dramatically. Stillbirths became common. Children who survived infancy often died before 10, and then the fertility collapsed. That is what actually ended the dynasty. Charles II married twice. No children from either union. His autopsy described devastating internal malformations consistent with extreme inbreeding. The autopsy reportedly described a body with not a single drop of blood, a heart the size of a peppercorn. The intestines were described as rotten and gangrenous. 3 large kidney stones were found. Modern geneticists believe his conditions match combined pituitary hormone deficiency and renal tubular acidosis, both strongly associated with high homozygosity, both recessive. His death triggered the War of the Spanish Succession, 14 years of continental war, because one dynasty bred itself into biological extinction through deliberate choice. But the study raised a question nobody expected. Where did the jaw actually start? The standard narrative assumes inbreeding created the jaw, but the data showed something more complicated. Frederick III already had it. His inbreeding coefficient was relatively low. The jaw existed before the worst inbreeding. The trait may have entered through a single ancestor, carrying the genetic variants already. Inbreeding didn't create the jaw. It amplified it and made it inescapable. Once the variants were in the family, Every consanguineous marriage raised the odds. With each generation of intermarriage, the probability of escaping the jaw shrank. The jaw was just a visible marker. Fertility, immunity, and cognition followed the same pattern. Every generation traded genetic health for political power. Every generation paid a higher price. They are just the most documented case study in history. The Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt practiced brother-sister marriage for 3 centuries. Inca emperors married their sisters. Japanese imperial lineages show similar patterns. The 18th dynasty of Egypt, Tutankhamun's parents, were likely brother and sister. Modern genetic analysis has confirmed similar damage in ancient Egyptian royal remains. Tutankhamun's remains showed bone disease and clubfoot consistent with inbreeding depression. Power demands purity. Biology demands diversity. But the Habsburgs left the most complete record. 6 centuries of data, portraits, medical records, genealogies, and now for the first time, direct genetic analysis. When diverse gene variants combine, the body has tools to fight disease and correct errors. Diversity is not a luxury. It is the operating system of biological survival. Conservation biologists now use the same genetic framework. Endangered species with low diversity face the same collapse. The cheetah population crashed through the same bottleneck. The Florida panther nearly vanished the same way. When identical variants combine, those backup tools disappear. The genome loses its redundancy. They didn't just lose a jaw. They lost the genetic diversity that keeps populations alive. The jaw was not a family trait. It was a biological countdown. Charles II is buried in the royal crypt at the Escorial. His tomb lies alongside the monarchs who made the choices that destroyed him. 16 Spanish monarchs rest here. The dynasty that chose purity over survival, preserved in gold and marble. The research continues. Genomic techniques are being applied to the actual remains. Future studies may sequence the actual Habsburg genomes and find the specific jaw mutations. Ancient DNA technology has advanced to the point where individual mutations can be identified from bone fragments centuries old. The sequencing machines that would have seemed like science fiction to court physicians are now standard equipment. The jaw that destroyed a dynasty may soon yield its exact genetic address. They may trace the variants to their origin ancestor, the one who brought the jaw into the dynasty. If you found this investigation valuable, consider subscribing. The Habsburgs built an empire on blood purity. Their own blood destroyed it, and somewhere in a laboratory, their genome is still being decoded. The jaw is still telling the story, and the proof was always in the face.